Hi BookTube, Aaron here. I hope you're doing very well. Today I've got a book haul for you, and I'm very much expecting it's going to be the last book haul of the year. It's been a bit of a scramble because usually when I make book haul videos, it's the results of one or two mad book buying frenzies that I've been on. Whereas with these, they've sort of come in dribs and drabs over the last month and a half, something like that. So I thought I'd go through them. They've come from a few different places. And I thought I'd start off with one that I have shown briefly on the channel in another video. So I thought, just for being a bit of a completionist, I should try to include it. And it was a birthday present that I got just over a month ago. And it's the New Roman Empire by Anthony Caldelis, a history of Byzantium. I'm really quite intrigued in Byzantine studies and in the history of Byzantium. I've been sort of dipping into it for about 5 years or so, and Judith Heron's Byzantium is really the only sort of general history of Byzantium that I've read so far. And so I'd had my eyes on this for quite some time. I'd had Anthony Caldelis sort of singled out as a scholar on Byzantium that I'd like to try as well, and so yeah, very kindly I got this for my birthday, so I'm looking forward to getting to it. I think it will be one of my projects for next year. I don't think I'll be starting it before the end of the year, as tempting as it might seem. And then I thought I'd show a few books that I picked them up because we were going through some of my late grandfather's things, and there are a few books that some people thought I might like, and I haven't scrabbled together everything that I ended up with from that. Part of me feels weird sort of showing off all of it, but I thought I'd just show a few that sort of stood out and I thought would be interesting to mention. And so one that we found in the garage was the Communist Manifesto, which I've read before, and I mean, it's always intriguing. It's got, about half of this is the introduction, and then the other half, we've got the manifesto itself, but then there were multiple prefaces, the different printings of it, and so it has a few of those. So just an interesting thing to have around as I sort of grapple with Marx, as I want to do every now and then. And then the Essential Tales of Chekhov. This is edited by Richard Ford. I think it's the Constance Garnett translations of the stories. Some of these stories I have, some I don't have, so I'm quite glad to have it. And I think this is I'm fairly certain that the Chekhov stories that I already have aren't in the Constant Garnett translation. I don't really mind Constant Garnett. I quite like her, so it's no problem with me. But I think the one in here that I was really quite excited about was Ward Number 6. That was the one that sort of stood out. I think The Kiss as well. I can't remember if that one is in the selection that I have. So anyway, it'll be interesting to read in a slightly different context to what I'm used to with Chekhov. Next up, again, I briefly showed this in another video. We've got Orwell, some of his non-fictions. This is volume 1 of his collected essays, journalism, and letters, and so this is 1920 to 1940. I'm very intrigued about this. I might just sort of dip in and out every now and then. But just looking at some of the people he's writing to and some of the people he's writing about, it looks really, really intriguing. So I'm quite looking forward to dipping into that. And then this last one, as we're going through his things, it was a bit of a awkward situation where essentially we didn't want to take anything that wasn't his. I sort of won't go into any details, but I was going through the bookshelves and felt a bit bad, taking any books from the bookshelves, not knowing whose they were really. And then I found this. This is Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny, and there's an inscription in this from my parents to my grandpa. So without a shadow of a doubt, I knew that it was one of his books, and that I had that sort of direct connection to it as well with my parents. Looks like my parents really enjoyed it, so hopefully I will too, and hopefully he did too. I don't know if he ever actually got round to reading it. Hopefully he did, and hopefully he likes it. And then moving on to some little free library books. We've got a little free library at work, and it's a little, well, it's kind of oversubscribed in that too many people are dropping books off, but not really enough people are picking books up. It's not really a circulation, it's more of a place that people leave unwanted books. So I dropped off a book, I dropped off a few books there, and there's just been one that's stayed there. And so I just decided just to take that, and I'll have a think about whether I want to keep it or whether I'll drop it off in a charity shop. But I picked up a few books as well. So I picked up this, The Pursuit of Love by Nancy Mitford, mainly off the recommendation of my booktube namesake Aaron from Aaron Read a Book, or Aaron Read a Book. He really enjoys the Mitford sisters, and I'm always quite intrigued by them whenever I hear someone talking about them, and particularly when he's talking about them. So I thought I'd give this a go, and this was one of the ones where I recognised the title. And then this one is a kind of double. This is a portrait of the artist as a young man by James Joyce. I've got this as a Penguin Modern Classics, or as a Penguin Modern Classic, and I'm trying to work out which of the two I prefer. I think I prefer this, but I'm going to go through and see what it has in terms of maybe critical apparatus and what the introductions are like and things like that. But part of me is leaning towards this. I think I prefer, I much prefer the cover of this to the other, and the way it feels as well. So we'll see how it goes, but I have a feeling that this is the edition that I'll keep, and the other one will find its way to a charity shop or something. And then the next one is one I'd noticed at the Little Free Library for some time, and I've been umming and ahhing about it for pretty much as long as it's been there. And so then sort of seeing, we had this message at work saying, please stop leaving books. And so I sort of took that as permission to take loads and loads of books. Because I also feel a bit guilty about taking too many books, but less so, considering the circumstances now. And so I decided to take a chance on this and grab it. And it's The Winter King by Bernard Cornwell. What does it say? A novel of Arthur. I think sort of imagining a semi-historical fiction sort of approach to the Arthurian myth, so slightly less magical, but maybe in its own way a little fantastical. We'll see. But I mean, just the map itself in these end papers, I've had so much fun, or me and my sister have had so much fun just poring over these end papers. They're so cool, and sort of tracing some of the place names. Just really, yeah, that's just a lot of fun in and of itself. So yeah, I'm not sure when I'll get to this, but it's certainly something. Just the longer it's here with me, I'm feeling more and more compelled to pick it up. And then a couple of poetry books that I ordered, both based off watching videos here on BookTube. The first was it was from the channel Adam Walker Close Reading Poetry. It's a great poetry channel for keeping yourself educated in poetry and how it works, and on the history of poetry and close reading certain poets and certain poems. And I think a year or two ago, Adam had this sort of course on, it was just sort of a survey of English poetry from Old English to the present. And I think his specialism is really in, well, I think he did his PhD on Wordsworth and the Romantics. He clearly has a love of English literature generally, but I think particularly of the early modern period as well. But right at the end, he was doing a lecture on postmodern poetry, and I was really intrigued to see what his angle would be on postmodern poetry, and what poets he would recommend, and what would stand out to him. And one of the poets that he brought up was a poet I don't believe I'd heard of before, called Caroline Berg. Just double checking her name, Caroline Bergfall. And here's her collection, Drift. And it says here on the back that Caroline Bergfall is, she's based in London, and she's of sort of French and Norwegian heritage. And what really drew me to this was that it's sort of trying to, even though it is, I mean, just looking at it, I mean, it starts off with scribbles, and then there are bits where there are, just star constellations in the middle, and then there are these sort of concentrated blocks of language, but sort of in there is this very compressed. I'm using the word compressed a lot about poetry at the moment. And very intense sort of language that is sort of echoing back to its own history. It's sort of echoing back to Old English in some cases. Like cold gesprung, weary worn, were my feet frost bound in the ice blinding clamour of colour. City sank further, seafaring is sea fodder heart, humbling. Could scarcely move or draw my breath, cursed with nightmares, gewhacked by sea chops, gave up all parts of me on gebattered ship. Yet a hunger in an mind stole me to more weird comas. Let me freeze. Blow, wind, blow, anon am I. And so just in there's that, sort of alliterative, sort of Old English thing going on there, sort of very much there, reminding me of the first canto of Pound's cantos in there, and just really, really lovely. And a lot of it then, if I can find a page, seems to draw inspiration from the Thorn, so an Old English letter. Anyway, it's the kind of thing I find quite fascinating, and I just never heard of it before, and was quite blown away by the readings that he gave of her poetry in that video. and so I'm quite excited to try her and see what's going on in Drift. And although like with that section I was reading out from is this kind of older seafaring voice that seems to be there. It's sort of contrasted then with more modern accounts of people adrift on the sea and of of refugees and things like that. So yeah, stuff that I find really fascinating, and I think I'll find it quite rewarding as I make my way through it. And then the other poetry collection I picked up based on a sort of recommendation in a video was Lives of the Heart by Jane Hirschfield, or Hirschfield, I should say. This was recommended by Bren Booth Jones in a video he made a few weeks ago on autumnal poetry and on some recommendations for poetry to read in autumn. And again, he read out a little bit from this, and I was intrigued and wanted to try it. And I've been looking out for Hirschfield ever since. And so I was quite excited to pick this up. Again, a poet that I didn't know that much about. I don't think I've read much by her before. I'll have to double check some anthologies that I've dipped in and out of. But I was very excited to give her a go. So she's someone I might be getting to soon. And then sort of bridging poetry and non-poetry. I think I'm increasingly this year, a lot of people think in terms of fiction and non-fiction. I think I'm increasingly thinking in terms of poetry and non-poetry, and that's sort of how I'm thinking of my reading diet. And this is a book I've been wanting to pick up for a while. Just an author I've been trying to, or hoping to try for pretty much the whole time I've been watching BookTube videos, or at least watching videos from this corner of BookTube. The author is Christian Wyman. This is Zero at the Bone, 50 Entries Against Despair. And I'd first heard of Wyman through, or at least first stood out to me through both through Jason from Old Blues Chapter and Verse. I think he really loves Christian Wyman, and then through Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading as well, Jason's wife, and two of my favourite channels, and two of the channels that really sort of sucked me into this corner of BookTube. And I was really intrigued by what they both had to say about Christian Wyman. I still want to try and find his collection, Every Riven Thing, which came very recommended by Jason a few years ago. And this is, it's sort of bits of it are poetry, bits of it are sort of journal entries and sort of essayistic things. Sometimes it's him commenting on other people's poetry and on, poetry from the past. So it seems like quite a fluid thing, but it's all about, what it says in the subtitle, apparently, about fighting against despair, or finding a remedy to despair, keeping from despair. So I'm really intrigued by it, and I can remember hearing Steve Donoghue talking about it before the book came out. I think earlier this year, Joshua Kribo read this and found it really helpful in a very personal way. And so, I've been really wanting to find it some time. So it's, again, one I'm quite glad and excited to have. And then moving on, the next two books I will do together. We're back into fiction now. And I sort of mentioned this the other day. Years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, I read the fourth book in Carlos Ruiz Zafron's Cemetery of Forgotten Books series, which is called The Labyrinth of the Spirits. I kind of hadn't noticed that it was part of a series, and I read it and enjoyed it, and then yeah, sort of felt like I needed to start at the beginning. So I'm hoping to read The Shadow of the Wind at some point soon, but then I had a book token to use, and so decided to basically use it on these. And so I've got the two middle books between the first book and the book I've read, and they are Angel's Game and The Prisoner of Heaven. And I think Angel's Game is a sort of more of a prequel to the first book, and then The Prisoner of Heaven is more of a typical sequel, I think. And I kind of got the impression that the sort of the storylines and where both of these go will end up informing the fourth book that I've read, the Labyrinth of the Spirits. So it'll be intriguing to reread that, actually having read the whole series. But I think it is a good thing, that I was able to read it. I think it's a good hallmark of a decent book, where even if it's part of a series, if you can just read it as a standalone, I think that is a good sign. And then the last book then is a classic. A classic novel I've been meaning to pick up for quite some time, meaning to read for quite some time. It's literally my white whale, and it's Moby Dick by Herman Melville. And in fact, I've had a free copy on my Kindle for some time, but I don't know. I wasn't completely sure if it had been abridged or not. It was something I kept meaning to check into and never did. And then, when I'm in bookshops, I'm sort of checking different editions, and I'm thinking, how much do I want this edition and not this edition? And I've been really toing and froing on whether to pick up a copy and just stick to the ebook, or whether I get any particular copy. And then I just caved eventually and got the one that deep down I knew I wanted all along, and that's the Penguin Deluxe Edition. And so now, I picked up a copy of Moby Dick or the Whale, by Herman Melville in this really lovely Penguin Deluxe Edition. That again, the refrain of the novel is of this video is that I'm really excited and quite glad to have it here. So we'll see how it does, how this edition holds up. But this is one that's, I think, going quite high on my list of priorities to read next year. And that's it. That's my book haul. Most likely it's going to be the last book, spout of books that I buy for the rest of the year. We're once again running out of room, and I should probably think of rearranging things at some point. I don't know to what extent you may have noticed that this Penguin Classics area over the course of the year has just sort of filled up more and more and more. So I need to keep myself from buying Penguin Classics for a bit while I work out what to do. So I'll do a little stack of everything that we've got. So we've got Moby Dick or the Whale. We've got The Prisoner of Heaven and Angel's Game, both by Carlos Ruiz Zafron and translated by Lucia Graves. I think that's Robert Graves' daughter, if I'm remembering correctly. Then we've got Zero at the Bone by Christian Wyman. We've got Jane Hirschfield, The Lives of the Heart. We've got Drift by Caroline Bergvall. We've got The Winter King by Bernard Cornwell. Then we've got James Joyce, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Whoops, just dropped the last one, or the next one. The Pursuit of Love by Nancy Mitford, Roger Zelazny, Lord of Light. I think seemingly about Krishna, but in a sci-fi setting. Orwell, the first volume of his letters, essays, and diaries and such. Some essentials tales of Chekhov in the Garnett translation. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, the Communist Manifesto, and then the book that will break my arm, The New Roman Empire by Anthony Called Ellis. So there we go, that is my big pile of books for, well, hopefully that should keep me content for some time now, and I shouldn't be, I shouldn't be going off and buying anything else for quite some time. So we'll see how much restraint I show. But for now, thank you very much for watching. I hope there was at least something interesting in here, and let me know if you've read any of these or if you'd recommend any of them. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.